And you guys are about as dumb as a bag of hammers for doing this.
Did you hear this? Canada is going to be putting American booze back on the shelves. Wonder what Doug Ford thinks about that.
So this is what I think about Crown Oil. That's what they could do. And I think everyone else should do the same thing.
In all reality, ladies and gentlemen, this didn't do anything to me. I've been sober for 5.5 years. The last thing I drank was a case of Labatt Blue. Pretty sure that's still brewed here in Canada, isn't it? I also enjoyed Bacardi rum. Is that American? I'm not sure. And what else? Oh, I loved my Patron. It was great. And I also, but that comes from Colombia anyway.
It's a whole mountain of chalk, ain't it? It smells like victory.
And I'm not trying to joke about my situation. I'm 1,987 days sober today, and I wouldn't want it any other way, ladies and gentlemen. But here's the thing. This was always going to happen. We didn't destroy the Americans because we took booze off our shelves. They have an economy that's 13 times the size of ours, and they can absorb 13 times the damage.
Twice as many Canadians are opening businesses in the United States than in Canada.
That's why even before these trade wars started, I said we need to diversify our economy. We got to stop sitting there and allowing provinces to block other provinces from making Canada better.
This agreement doesn't require us to support any pipeline proposal from Alberta.
And we still haven't learned our lesson. There's Native chiefs now calling on this new supposed pipeline that's going to be built to the south coast of BC to stop it.
The truth is that Canada can create all the MOUs, project offices, advisory groups that they want, but chiefs are united. When it comes to approving large national projects on First Nations lands, there will not be getting around rights holders.
The country's broken, ladies and gentlemen. If you can't see that by now, I don't know what else to tell you. And if you don't realize the natives are going to block every single new project that comes through and it's never going to be built, well, I also don't know what to tell you.
We will never consent to allowing oil tankers in our coastal waters.
And for all those out there thinking about getting sober or are sober, you guys are awesome. And trust me, it's...
Canada just blinked at midnight, and it might have cost Mark Carney everything he promised his voters. As the clock ticked toward a brutal 50% U.S. tariff deadline on nearly $28 billion in Canadian goods. Ottawa scrambled for a last-minute reprieve while 8 provinces quietly refused to fall in line. Premiers like Doug Ford, Danielle Smith, and Scott Moe went public with conflicting demands, exposing a fractured federation that Washington openly exploited. Carney, elected in April on a promise to fight Trump's tariffs head-on, now finds his own countrymen working against him. This is the story of a prime minister caught between a hostile White House and a rebellious home front, and the voters who backed him are watching the cracks widen in real time. If you want to understand how Canada's internal war could decide its economic future, hit subscribe right now, because this story is moving fast and you won't want to miss what comes next.
I think it's really important to note for viewers, Americans put the 338 tariffs, these latest tariff threats on, sources say, to flush Canada out, to force Canada to the negotiating table. And so given that, sources who are briefed sort of on the U.S. perspective say, why would the U.S. then also allow another extension? It doesn't square with their goal of getting some sort of resolution on these things. And I think also important to look at the broader agenda and climate for Mark Carney. I think there's more and more incentive for him to also get a deal, because international players that he is trying to attract to Canada to spur investment, to spur the Canadian economy, say they need to see more stability in the trading relationship between Canada and the U.S. in order to make some of those investment decisions. He has a big investment summit coming up in early September where he's going to want to land some deals. And so how all of this shakes out, there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of moving pieces, and I think that there is more and more focus from the economy and industry side of getting a deal. Whether the Prime Minister can bring the political side along, I think, does remain a question, and how the premiers respond, of course, as well.
Here's the detail most headlines buried. While Carney was negotiating for his political life, he wasn't even in the country. As his top negotiators scrambled to keep talks alive ahead of the tariff deadline, Carney himself was vacationing in Italy, only staying in contact by phone. For voters who elected him specifically to stand toe-to-toe with Trump, that image landed hard. Carney has since described the negotiations in blunt terms, calling them nasty, delicate, and intense language that reveals just how close this deal came to collapsing entirely. Meanwhile, provincial leaders were making their own moves without waiting for Ottawa's signal. The optics told a story of a leader stretched thin, defending a base that expected decisive leadership and instead watched drama unfold from a distance. Every day the provinces stalled. Carney's promise to fight for Canadian workers looked shakier, and the clock kept running.
So a little bit of breaking news before the breaking news. This is in regards to the Canada-US trade agreement and negotiations thereof. This is part one. I'm going to tell you what's been agreed to. Just don't ask me how I know. So, number one, this is what's going to happen. The United States tariff on Canadian steel and aluminum will be dropped from 50% to 25%. But there will be a quota system put in place. So only a certain amount of Canadian steel can be exported to the United States. Excuse me. So I want you to remember, however, that we have other agreements in place with other countries, and they want our aluminum and steel without a tariff. So we're playing the big game here. Number two, Canadian-built cars and trucks. The tariff on those will be reduced from 25% to 15%. Also, from the Canadian perspective, Carney, as we already know, will ask the premiers to put US liquor on the shelves. Not that many people are probably going to buy it, to be honest with you, because, you know, the sentiment that Trump threatening Canada has left a really bad taste in their mouth, no pun intended. Thirdly, Canada to abolish the US dairy tariff it has on the United States, which has never been enacted. I think it's really important to mention this. It's never been enacted. And it was actually Donald Trump and Justin Trudeau that came up with this tariff in the first place. So this is very strange territory that we're in. So folks, let me know what you think about this. This is part one. There's more information coming. Ask no questions, hear no lies. There's more information coming. Let me know what you think about it in the comments. Love you guys to give me a follow. And this is where things are at right now.
The alcohol ban tells you everything about how deep this divide really runs. 8 of Canada's 10 provinces have kept American booze off their shelves since early last year. A retaliatory strike against Trump's tariffs that Washington now cites as justification for piling on more. Ottawa desperately needed provinces to lift those restrictions to unlock a deal, and they simply wouldn't move. Voters who backed Carney's national unity message watched provincial premiers effectively veto their own prime minister's strategy. It's a brutal irony. The very retaliation Canadians cheered a year ago became the sticking point blocking them all. Relief Carney's government promised to deliver. Critics argue this exposes something voters didn't sign up for. A leader who can rally applause lines about standing firm, but can't actually align the country behind one plan. When the people who elected you can't even agree with the provinces that answer to you, whose voters are really being represented.
Canada is now less than 48 hours away from another major escalation in the trade war with the United States. And this one could hit Canadian businesses hard. Starting Wednesday, Trump is threatening 50% tariffs on roughly $20 billion worth of Canadian exports. We're talking furniture, dairy products, wine, cement, building materials, and much more. And here's what caught my attention. Some of these tariffs could even apply to Canadian goods that already qualify under CUSMA. Now, I work in construction, so when I hear things like lumber, building materials, steel, and aluminum getting caught up in the trade war immediately, I wonder, who eventually pays for all this? Because tariffs might start at the border, but those costs have a funny way of working their way through businesses, jobs, and eventually into our wallets. Canadian and American negotiators are still talking, and there's still time for a deal. But we're getting awfully close to the August 19th deadline. So here's the question I want answered. If Canada manages to avoid these tariffs, what did we have to give up to get the deal? Because Canadians deserve to know exactly what we're gaining and exactly what we're giving away. Over and out.
And families. But agreeing on a goal isn't the same as agreeing on a strategy. And Ottawa never locked down a common approach with provincial leaders before those tariffs hit. Analysts have pointed out that Washington learned something crucial from this pattern. A divided Canada is a pressure point, and applying pressure gets results. For the voters who trusted Carney to project strength on the world stage, watching premiers publicly stake out their own conflicting positions suggested the opposite. A federation Trump could pick apart province by province. That's not the story Carney's base was promised in April. And the longer the divisions persisted, the more that promise looked broken.
Premier Scott Moe is sharing his thoughts on trade with the United States after a tentative deal was struck to put another round of tariffs from President Donald Trump on pause. While the fine details are being worked on, Moe says this broad agreement is good for Saskatchewan, Canada, and the world. CTV News has learned tariffs in certain sectors like steel and aluminum are being reduced as part of the agreement with the U.S. While these tariffs have only affected roughly 5% of the Saskatchewan economy, Moe says the status quo was not possible and negotiators had to find the best path forward.
You need to make every effort to come to a trade agreement with your largest trading partner. Should they move away from this deal in a month or 3 months or 6 months, that is beyond the control of myself or Prime Minister Carney or anyone in Canada for that matter.
Moe says in a conference call this afternoon, Prime Minister Mark Carney asked Canadian premiers to put American booze back on the shelf for this deal to move forward. Saskatchewan and Alberta are the only two provinces continuing to sell American alcohol.
Now, the real question isn't whether Canada avoided the tariffs, it's who actually won the fight inside the country. Even after the U.S. agreed to postpone its 50% tariff deadline, the underlying tension never disappeared. Sectoral tariffs on steel, aluminum, autos, and lumber remain a live threat, and provinces still hold the leverage Ottawa needs to close any lasting deal. Carney's negotiators have privately admitted fears that talks could collapse entirely if the provinces don't budge. For the voters who handed Carney a mandate to fight Trump on their behalf, the uncomfortable truth is that his hardest battle may not be in Washington at all. It's convincing his own country to fight as one, whether that unity ever arrives or whether provincial rebellion keeps undercutting him at every turn, will define not just this trade deal, but the entire Carney era. And the next deadline is already on the horizon, and Canada still hasn't answered the question that matters most.
Well, I suppose what I would say is for decades we have had major trade issues with Canada. So when you say 1 or 2 issues, that would be nice if it were 1 or 2 issues. There are a lot of issues, and we're speaking about all of them. I won't give any more detail than that, other than all these things that we have been concerned with for decades on the U.S. side. We have been raising them. We continue to raise them. And I think that any potential resolution has to include all of these or a pathway forward. Well, again, for us, this is not a trade war. We have domestic supply chains we're trying to protect and support. That's what we're trying to do. It's not Canada specific. We're doing this globally. If a country retaliates against us, we're obviously not going to tolerate that. We'll take action. My sense is the Canadians, they want to have a more conciliatory approach, but